Okay, this is our title, me and my colleague. Let me briefly introduce ourselves firstly. We are both full-time scholars in Yeditepe University Department of Architecture. My PhD is from Istanbul Technical University, Department of Architectural Design program, and I also conducted a postdoctoral study in Politecnico di Milano last year. My colleague Safak Cudi Ince is also full-time research assistant in Yeditepe, and she's currently conducted her PhD in Istanbul Technical University. Today, we would like to present you a kind of a discussion paper in here called A Provocateur Create an Ethical Shift, Social Values of Architecture versus Patrik Schumacher. So we know that it's a kind of tricky title, but the topic is tricky in itself. The aim of our research in here is to argue the ongoing discussions against Patrik Schumacher. I think you all know what happened. He's a very controversial figure in nowadays, let's say, that architectural discussions. And then in terms of ethical concerns, of course, and then questioning the fundamental values of the profession if there is such kind of things. To achieve this aim, we firstly analyze the definition of architecture. We first actually analyze the definition of ethics in philosophy, but it's a huge and very deepened topic. So I'm just going to summarize it briefly in here, as we did in our paper. And the architectural ethics, what is the architectural ethics, and the definitions according to literature. And then we try to position the Schumacher-based discussion in this theoretical framework. And we are going to present you the discussions against Patrik Schumacher on the most visited architectural digital media platforms, and then we are going to discuss what happens, what's the motive of the discussions, and what is the motive of the critics and the reactions. Because we think that the most visible way to track those reactions against Schumacher's narratives are the social media platforms. I must say that we cannot find, during our researches, we cannot find any academic papers or articles about that topic who criticize Patrik Schumacher's narratives in theoretical framework. Only we can find are the interviews, social media interviews, and social media articles and columns. So that's another important thing in that point that we are going to also present it in the conclusion part. For the methodology of this research, we firstly to better understand the ethical perspective of Schumacher, we first refer to his main books called The Autopoiesis of Architecture in 2 volumes, and his other writings and presentations and speeches in other platforms to better understand his definition of architectural morality and or ethic. And then to analyze and discuss the reactions against Schumacher, related narratives, of course, the contents of architectural digital media platforms are considered as the initial data source. So we used Alexa program to determine the top 5 most visited architectural website. I must say that any other medium or program may change the results, but Alexa is the only program right now that share the results with the third parties. So that's why we found it suitable for our research. And we searched for the 73 English medium digital platforms, and then Alexa helped us to determine the top 5 of them. And in that 5 platforms, we search some keywords. If you just search for Patrik Schumacher, you can see hundreds of results, but we need to narrow the scope of this search. So that's why we use different keywords to understand the number of the articles that is published about that topic. And finally, according to our results, we categorized the main discussions around Patrik Schumacher on ethical concerns of architecture in 3 subtitles. One of them is the housing crisis and the free market economy, the narratives of Schumacher's housing crisis and the free market economy, and the political correctness movement through Venice Architectural Biennial and the Pritzker Prize, and finally his narratives on star architects and iconic design. But I should say that the third subtitle also are being discussed within these two subtitles. So basically, we concentrate on these two subtitles in this study. So those are the top 5 most visited architectural digital media platforms according to Alexa result. This ArchDaily is the #1 and the Architects newspaper is the #5. So in here, you can see the number of the articles that we have found according to our research. So basically, we concentrated on the, sorry, I forgot the number. We concentrated on the 53 articles and most specifically, as you can see bold in here, 47 of them. So if we want briefly present concept of ethic and the ethical concerns in architecture, first we should say that definition of ethic in the philosophy of ethics generally presented as what we ought to do. But there are some other approaches in that discussions, like the utilitarianism and etc. And also Kant is an important figure, an actor in here, generally associated with the modernist ethic. And the ethical discussions generally in itself, not in architecture, generally concentrated on the moral virtues and the values of the human being for the sake of his or her or the other humans. But in architectural ethic definitions, we can say that there is not much literature about that topic till the last quarter of the 20th century. There are barely no books or articles or publishings about architectural ethics till the fourth quarter of the 20th century. There are important scholars in that topic, like Smith, Perez Gomez, and Fisher. But when we try to understand what is architectural ethic, we just realize that it's a kind of tendency that shapes through the zeitgeist, let's say. So sometimes it plays the role of the ecological responsibilities, and the other times it plays the role of social duties of architecture, and the other some other discussions believes that the gender studies and etc. are also a part of the ethical discussions and etc. But we cannot clearly define what architectural ethics in that topic. Actually, we don't need to. We are not trying to find the final and the one answer for it. But I should also mention that Bauman's perspective of ethics. According to Bauman's perspective of ethics, we should describe it in postmodern world with a different point of view. So as I told you before, as you say ethics, one may generally think about Kant's perspective of ethics. But according to Bauman, the orthodox descriptions of ethics are not so suitable in today's postmodern world. So in postmodern, ethics should be studied differently from the modernist ethic approaches. So it's also same in architecture, we believe so. So when we talk about architectural ethics, we generally face with this dichotomy, the autonomy and the morality in architecture. According to morality perspective, architecture and the architects should find proper solutions for the society in itself. But according to autonomy perspective, architect is a kind of profession that belongs to society, and they are responsible to societal duties as every human being does. So according to autonomy perspective, aesthetic is much more dominant, but according to morality perspective, the ethic duties are much more dominant. And I'm going to skip this to save a little more time for the rest of the presentation. So according to moral virtues generally, and the autonomy, both the autonomy and the morality studies generally, adding moral virtues to architecture, the profession itself rather than the architects. It's an important thing in here. So what Patrik Schumacher did in that discussions, what was he triggered in that discussions? Everything actually started with his not first, but in that topic first, within that scope, the first post in Facebook in 2014. In 2014, it was the year that Shigeru Ban won the Pritzker Prize, and the Ram Koolhaas was the creator of the Venice Architectural Biennial. And he published a post from Facebook, only on Facebook, and then maybe also in Twitter. I'm not so sure about that, but no any other digital media platforms or academic platforms, and say that stop political correctness in architecture. And he said that architecture is not art, and architecture does not have a social duties to create a better environments. And in 2016, he posted another thing on Facebook, while after it was announced that Aravena is going to be the new curator of the Venice Architectural Biennial, and at the same year, Alejandro Aravena also won the Pritzker Prize. And he said that, okay, the political correctness takeover of architecture is completed, and according to his point of view, architecture turns into a kind of medium that do good, feel good profession, and the architects are playing that role to clean their dirty hands, let's say it like that. They are doing some humanitarian works to make architecture more humanitarian profession, but it's not like that. This is not the responsibility of architecture, and etc. But I must say that before his posts on Facebook, he published 2 volumes of book, one in 2011 and one in 2012, called The Autopoiesis of Architecture, a New Framework for Architecture, and The Autopoiesis of Architecture, Volume 2, a New Agenda for Architecture. In that book, actually, Patrik Schumacher definitely defined the same opinions with a very strict and deep theoretical framework. But no one criticized it, no one gives any reactions to that, and etc. They were very huge books actually, and in a very theoretical books, and he was saying completely the same things about the architectural social jobs and the architectural morality sections of the book. And before that, in 1997, he also gave a lecture in Architectural Association Graduation School's Ethic Lecture Series called Materialism versus Morality. It was a 2-part of seminars. And again in there, he proposed the same idea, same theoretical approach according to ethical discussions and the definition of architectural ethics in there. But there were no any criticisms and or reactions on those days until he posted them on Facebook. In that speech, Schumacher described the morality as a kind of societal experience and dissemination of current traditional judgments via dogmatic rules. And he said that the worst is the metamorphosis of the moral tenets to reactionary defense mechanism as weighted interests. So according to Patrik Schumacher, morality is something that can change and shaped according to the orthodox beliefs or the orthodox concerns of the society, and they are not the untouchables, as with his words. And his perspective is very close to Bauman's postmodern ethics perspective, by the way. In his books, he described, I'm just briefly talking about it, of course, these are the 1,000 pages of books and etc. And he said that architecture doesn't have a value in itself. If you believe it has, it will be that fetishism. It's just a profession like every other professions. And it's an institutional and societal subsystem, according to Schumacher. Instead, it needs transdisciplinary theoretical conjectures, as we all believe. And the societal tasks of profession are not pre-given, according to Schumacher. And only the actors of architecture are generally tend to embrace those social duties, but without any reason behind that. These are the Schumacher's perspective, by the way. And the biggest problem, let me call it as a problem, happened in the 2016 in the speech of World Architectural Festival in Berlin. In the opening speech, he declared a kind of 8-point manifesto, housing manifesto for London. I believe that you all know that. And after his statements against the social housing and after his supportness of the capitalist economy and the free market economy for the cities and the housing sector, there had been a huge protests. This is not the huge protest. There had been a huge protest in the social media, but this also happened a real protest in Zaha Hadid architects, in front of the Zaha Hadid architects, let's say that. It was led by the class war and activist group in London, and they announced from their social media platforms that bring posters, banners to protest against the architect of social cleansing, fascism. And this was so interesting for us because any of the architects did not face, as far as I know, did not face that kind of reaction in the 20th century or maybe earlier. So this is a kind of very, it's like an declaration of the evil genius of the architecture and etc. And after that, Zaha Hadid architects also, sorry about that, I need to take it from my, okay. After that, Zaha Hadid architects also declared a letter to the society that they will not, they disown the speeches of Patrik Schumacher, and Hadid's family and friends also disowned his narratives about social housing problems and the housing crisis in London. So he basically criticized in every platform. And then he gave an interview to The Guardian and said that he had been depicted as a fascist. First, he also declared a kind of apology, not a direct apology, but he said that I do not mean to embrace any part of my colleagues and any architects who believe the opposite of mine, but he said that it's a kind of event that shows him or proves him that the current left liberal, or let's say the anti-capitalist consensus within our discipline has shaped the architectural ethical concerns or the societal duties in architecture. So what we have found in social media against Patrik Schumacher, and we try to understand the motive of these reactions, why people reacted that architect so much, because it's not a very conventional thing. So it's clear that in not every platform, in those 5 platforms, he's been calling as provocateur. Okay. I'm going to give you some examples in here. For example, in ArchDaily, this was very interesting for the research, I think, because ArchDaily said that in 2016, the editorial team declared that they choose not to cover Schumacher's speech first. So it's basically a censorship. And then since it has been a huge controversial topic in other platforms, they try to discuss on these issues, but they said that they, as an editorial team, they completely disagree with his words and etc., and say that he doesn't represent the whole society, whole architectural society. These are some examples from the some of them are titles of the articles, and the others are some parts of the discussions in Arc Daily. In that article, Ben versus Schumacher, should architect assume social responsibility, Jones actually makes a good point to try to understand what Schumacher said, and Stott also it kind of agrees with the Schumacher, but not his thoughts, just said that it's a kind of different point of view that we should discuss. And the others, all the others, generally criticized Schumacher, but we as readers don't understand why, because they do not hesitate to use slang words and etc. For example, in here, I kept silent until that is Patrik Schumacher said something utterly stupid and spoiled and etc. The worst thing about 2016 Venice Biennial was the response of its sanctimonious critics, which the writer directly pointed out to Schumacher and etc. That was a huge reactions. But as a reader, we cannot understand the motive of the reactions, because every columnist or the author says that this is a very elitist way of understanding the profession, but they do not provide or define what it should be, and no one can define what is the societal duty of architecture and etc. So it was a kind of very reflexive reactions to Schumacher. And then this is the title of the article, by the way. It's time to stop listening to Patrik Schumacher. And according to Harper, this is another Harper, by the way, not the author in the Arc Daily. He said that his position is nothing more than a soundbite, repeating the word market while Rome burns. And he said that no one can properly answer him, because this also proves the lack of intellectualism in architectural world. These are some of the other titles and the discussions in the design. We can clearly actually categorize the authors in three subsections. Some of them are very objective. They just present the news in itself. For example, Schumacher said something, blah, 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 and the people reacted like that. That was the objective way to present a news. There are some columnists and the authors that really discuss the topic, even if they disown or own the narratives of Schumacher. But some of the columnists and the authors generally pursue a kind of timid policy. They do not clearly present their ideas on discussions on that topic, but they prefer to publish the readers' comments on their pages. Like here. This article is written by Carter in Deason, but you cannot understand what he or she discussed in his paper or her paper. He just presented the reader comments in here. And as you can see in here, this is the Trumpism essentially. Sounds like he just got out of bed with Margaret Thatcher. There are some kind of critics called him Mr. Nasty, the Donald Trump of architecture and etc. But really, we do not understand what is the basic motive in a theoretical perspective of these reactions. By the way, as an architect scholar, I also disagree many of his reactions, but this is another point. In Architect, we can also see the same schedule in there. There are also such kind of authors that objectively presents the news or give places to reader comments. Generally blame him being an elitist and etc. Maybe they're right. And Architect magazine, sorry. Architect magazine is actually objective place in that in that 5 digital media platforms. Only Betsky in here tried to discuss what he said in a theoretical framework in terms of the ethical concerns of the society. An architect's newspaper also very objective. That's why there is not an caption in here. In architect's newspaper, every article about that issue, ethical concerns of architecture through Patrik Schumacher narratives, let's call it like that, they completely objectively presented those news. If they use some kind of interviews with other architects who reacted to Patrik Schumacher, they also published that, oh, this is not our policy, this is not our way of thinking, this verse just belongs to the interviews and etc. But the main, we can clearly say that there is a huge reaction against Patrik Schumacher's narratives on architectural social duties and the moral values of architecture. But we cannot understand why those people reacted to his narratives and what is their theoretical motive to react to these realities. Because in the, if you clearly analyze the writings that has been written by those authors, no one can clearly define that duty, the social duty, why it has to be, or does it ever be. So no one knows what is it actually. I also don't know what is it. What is the social duties of architect? It's a kind of doxa that we call it doxa in our conclusion part. And it's a kind of orthodox beliefs that architecture has a social duty in itself. But does architecture ever achieved a kind of duties, or does it ever been like that, and etc.? No one discuss about it. No one also discuss why it has to be like that. And as a conclusion, we believe that this situation shows us that it all brings the questions that the accepted agreements or the untouchables, with Schumacher words, of architecture. So the social duty of architecture is a kind of abstract consensus that every architect or architecture students tend to believe, but no one can clearly define it. And he also, authors, thinks that Schumacher's these speeches can be considered, or Schumacher as himself can be considered as a potential deconstruction of historical a priori in architectural ethics, because there is a kind of structure of historical a priori on architectural ethics, but as all a priori things happens, it's a kind of pre-given things to us. But we cannot date back it to academically or scientifically or etc. We cannot find the roots of it, maybe modernism, but not exactly. And we believe that instead of those kind of reactive, not reactive, instead of those kind of reflexive reactions, we believe that the scholars should study that topic regarding the ethical codes and the societal viewpoint of architectural ethics by re-evaluating the origins of social benefit theories. Instead of a huge and memorized reactions against him, I think this has to be studied according to his philosophy and according to his books, what he described in there theoretically, and what is the today's expectancies, let's say, is from architecture as a social duty profession, and the reality in between them. This has to be studied in a more deepened studies instead of giving interviews and etc. And as a secondary outcome, not a result, from our research stats, the social media platforms are more powerful and stronger than the academic writings, because before Patrik Schumacher posted his ideas on Facebook, no one was aware of his theories or perspectives. When he published those 2 volumes of books, he was also a popular architect. He was working with Zaha Hadid, as he is today, and he had managed and conducted many famous and iconic projects in the world, but no one, we clearly understand that many people didn't read his writings. No one was aware of the ideas behind those buildings until he posted it on Facebook. So as we scholars, it's also interesting that have to track the roots of the discussions from social media platforms. This is a secondary outcome that we all, I think, scholars have to be taught, think about it. This is all for us today. Thank you very much for your attention.